Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the second speaker of the morning session, Mr. Pavan Pudipeddi. Pavan Pudipeddi is the co-founder and CEO of Spykke Innovations Pvt Limited, India's premier CaaS charging as a service provider. While at Texas Instrumentation or Instruments from 2008 to 2013 as a part of the WPC management team, Pavan played an integral role in forging key industry alliances that have shaped the current market. Pavan also brings extensive experience from TI's battery management and wireless power business, where he held multiple leadership positions for over a decade. Pavan has developed technologies in power management, battery management, system design, and product development for various companies. He was one of the founding members of the Wireless Power Consortium, WPC, a multinational technology consortium that was formed to create and promote wide market adoption of the QI standards used for wireless charging in many products. Ladies and gentlemen, Pavan Pudipeddi.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Recommerce, for giving me this opportunity. Thanks all the dignitaries and fellow colleagues here from this industry. I thoroughly enjoyed Mr. Rao's talk just before this. I'm totally new to this recycling industry. I come from a product development background. Yes, I've used batteries to build systems and solutions, and yes, I've been with battery and management industry and all kinds of power-related technologies for many years. But recycling is new because you drive on the road, but you don't really understand what goes underneath making the road, right? But thanks, I really appreciate this opportunity. It allowed the product guy inside me, the innovator inside me, and the engineering guy inside me to really get deeper into this and understand which angle should I look at this from. So a lot of the questions that you've been asking Mr. Rao are sort of addressed here, and I've touched upon some of those aspects. I approached this whole talk about economics of battery recycling and financial viability from a innovator's perspective, and how would I, when I build it, how would I build it, what are the challenges that I would run into, and hopefully it will be beneficial for a lot of you here. So the idea of circular economy just is not about the bottom part of it. It's actually, for me, it's the top part, right? So recycling should be the last thing when we think about circular economy. The first is right from the beginning of the product development, you need to think reuse, reduce in the sense you use as much less material or products or ingredients as possible to build your product that it is recyclable, right? So this is something I found online, and I really love this slide. It talks about all the things in typical waste management hierarchy versus circular economy hierarchy, right? Including repair and refurbished and remanufacture, right? So a lot of this I will be touching upon as I talk through this thing, this space. So vision for 2030, we all know that, this is from Niti Aayog. The chart looks amazing. We're going to have about the worldwide capacity is almost 40% is going to be India's requirement by the time it is 2030. Goal of getting 100% EV by 2030 is, and we are on the charter to get that, and it will open up a whole lot of opportunities economically, job-wise, innovation-wise, so on and so forth, like Ixigo, and I think Ubicore is one more company doing very well in this space, and tons more will be coming up, and I'm hoping a lot of innovation also comes into this space through that, right? So recycling, traditionally we've been doing lead acid recycling, and lead acid has an advantage. It's got tens and tens of years of experience in processes and technologies and improvisations and maturity. When it comes to recycling aspects of it, 97% plus is recycled in the US and EU, and it's a very simple metal combination, right? But when it comes to lithium batteries, it's not as simple as lead acid. There's tons of different combinations, as you can see on the right. You have lithium cobalt, lithium manganese, lithium iron phosphate, so on and so forth, used across multitude of applications, right? So one of you asked a very good question, what do I do with lithium phosphate and recycling? Well, all these are the things that you have to take into account when you are planning a recycling business around this, right? And that's where the challenges are, that's where the complexities are, and that is exactly where you have the opportunity to innovate. So I keep using the word innovate because that's the field I come from, but that is probably going to be the most important thing if you want to be successful in this space. Innovation in business model, innovation in processes, innovation in logistics, innovation in operations, right? Whatever, that would be, the way I would definitely look at it, right? So this is a typical journey of a, let's say lithium-ion battery. This is nothing rocket science. A lot of you people know this. But the nuances in this are what are the points of innovation, or what are the points of areas where we can do something differently, right? Obviously, the mining, refining, production, pack production, first life use, and then comes where this whole topic is about, right? What do you do after it is collected, after the first life, right? And that's where the second life comes in, where you find alternative applications. For example, I represent Spyke. Spike's a power bank on rent or a shared power bank service. And we have the flexibility as we build more future solutions, we can actually be part of that second life activity. We don't really need fresh batteries to run our systems, right? I mean, we don't really need fresh batteries on our system. All these lithium-ion batteries are, when they're not only 20-30% of performance, they still have tons of years of capacity left in them, and we can absolutely use into our application. So we are one of those applications in that space. And obviously the recycling part, and then we're getting back into the entire ecosystem. I don't want to really spend any time on this. I mean, there are all kinds of experts in this room regarding this recycling process. But typically, obviously, the end of the stage where smelting and extraction do come in, that is another space to innovate. I'm pretty sure there is lots of opportunities to innovate in this space. Not everything. I think today I can bet on it. I'm sure we are not extracting more than 60-70% of what can be extracted from the minerals or from the black mass or from the end product at that stage. There is a great opportunity. I was just reading around that there's a company called Atero that claims that they can extract more than 90% or close to 98% of cobalt from the recycling process, which is great, which is incredible. I love when people in India make such claims because then we are setting ourselves at the global level at a higher stage, right? So the second life potential, you all know this, spent batteries contain about 75-80% of the capacity still left in them, right? And they can be used across applications. Could be Spyke. Spyke's one of the greatest example, and we are committed to that. I'll talk about it in a second. You have energy storage systems, and also light mobility vehicle. Like all these last mile vehicles doesn't necessarily need to have fresh batteries. You can recycle from the cars and then put them into the last mile mobility vehicles, right? And across the globe, you have companies like Audi, BMW, and Chevy who have already committed to building maybe forklifts or in-house vehicles for their operations to be using some of this stuff, right? So where is the money in recycling really? I mean, yeah, it's all very fancy to have a recycling business, but where is really the money, right? Money is obviously in minerals, right? Nickel and cobalt are the most valuable. You can get about $25 per kilowatt hour, right? So this chart on the left talks about what kind of material is available inside a typical, this is like I took an example of a Chevy, 60 kilowatt hour battery. And typically next one would have like a half of that 30 kilowatt hour battery. But if you look on the right, that is what is interesting, right? If nickel and cobalt are the most valuable, and you have all these other chemistries that come in where you have nickel, manganese, cobalt, and NCA and LFP, where the amount of nickel and cobalt is coming down. Right, so if you're recycling those, you're obviously, not taking advantage of, the value that cobalt and nickel are able to give you in terms of the economic viability, right? So those are definitely something to keep in mind, right? It's important to, when you're doing the recycling business or getting into it, understand these nuances, these aspects of it, right? Especially if you're, working in this part of the process, right? The opportunity, obviously, the demand is skyrocketing, we all know that, and the goal for 2030 is very obvious, and more importantly, we as a country have a commitment towards this Paris 2C Accord, which we are saying that we will definitely keep the global warming below the 2 degrees rise compared to the pre-industrial levels, right? And of course, Atmanirbhar Bharat is a big part of it. China has 16% of lithium reserves, but they are a dominant player in this industry only because the majority of the work they do in recycling. They have such a mature process in the entire recycling process, they've become self-reliant. The reason China is so powerful today is fundamentally self-reliance, right? Australia, Chile, and China control effectively 86% of the lithium mining across the globe, right? But China is still a stronger power even though they only have 16% of the minerals, right? And that's because of self-reliance. So by having a economically and financially viable and technologically viable recycling systems in our country, we can become self-reliant, and that should be absolutely be our goal. And more importantly, not to forget the last one, leave a better planet for our future generations, obviously, through this process. Well, the challenge is, obviously, 100 crore, 160 crore, 300 crore, that's not a, child's play, right? And it's seriously heavy capex investment again, right? And if you don't understand the nuances, I mean, even getting into it, it's not going to be a cakewalk, right? Investments into innovation, see, fundamentally, I don't know, I always feel this, and I've had this chat with many OEMs. Somehow we struggle to spend money, time, effort on what it takes to innovate. We just don't understand innovation as a country. It's very sad. A lot of us go outside to another country and innovate in those countries. So that's the saddest part. I see that. I've seen that over the last decade. I've moved back to India, right? So that has to be a focus. Business will happen. Of course, it will happen. But over time, what will give value to your business is innovation and product development and IP and all sorts of those things, right? If a company like Atero is able to claim that they are the only company on this planet that can get carbon credits for the recycling process, that is a proud thing to say, and they're able to do that because they've invested in innovation, right? And lack of regulatory framework, and that point is getting nullified as we just saw Mr. Rao talk about the regulations for 2022, that are draft regulations that are coming out. The challenges of that is going to be enforcement. Actually, we can all have all kinds of regulations, but enforcing and ensuring the enforcement is possible, right? And because you can't force companies, you actually have to incentivize companies to follow these rules that we put forth, right? Another challenge is evolving battery chemistries. Again, some of the cars, like even Tesla and some of the newer models, will start moving to LFP because they want larger, longer cycles. Well, nickel gives them better density, but LFP gives them better cycles. So, that is going to happen. You'll have to keep an eye on all those changes that are happening in industry, and hopefully technology and innovation and those things will come in for us to figure out a way to how to recycle those as well, right? And hopefully through this, we stop playing catch up with China and South Korea. They're way ahead compared to us in what can be done here, right? So, as a startup guy, I always build this up because it allows me to think through how would a business model canvas would look like if I have to run this business today, right? I mean, what are the key aspects? What value proposition am I providing? What customer segments are looking at? Where do I make money? What kind of relations do I have to build? What is driving my cost? What are the key activities? What resources would I need? What channels would I use to build the business? And who my key partners are going to be, right? I'm not going to go through each one of them. I mean, we talked about value proposition. The key activities in my mind are, definitely awareness and education that is missing in general in this space. I mean, everybody in this room knows about recycling, but you step out, 100 meters away and they don't really care, right? So awareness and education is very important in this, because all those people and kids and colleges and everywhere are going to go start working in companies where they're going to start making decisions or buying material, buying articles, living their life, and they're all part of the same ecosystem, right? So I don't want to get too much into this, but it gives you a good perspective on various aspects that come into the business model canvas of the recycling business, right? Where is the money spent, right? This is, I took it from an analysis of a company from China, right? These are very mature, running at scale. This company is running at scale. So somebody asked a question, at what scale do we need to run? Can I run 1,000 ton, 10,000 ton, 100,000 ton? This gives you an idea. This is one of the biggest companies running at scale in China, and they spend 30% of their money on transportation. Right? And Mr. Rao had pointed that out as well, is that is going to kill you. You don't think, I mean, hey, I have technology, I have people, I have the factory, all this is fancy, but getting materials over there is going to kill you, right? So it's very important that the location of the factory or the location where you do your processing, everything, keep transportation in mind on how you do that, right? From a financial viability perspective, the biggest drivers are obviously cell chemistry. As the chemistry changes, you can see a table on the right. As the chemistry changes, the value that is put on each of the minerals or materials that are in that particular chemistry changes quite a bit. Battery acquisition and transport. If you have an LFP, even in the US, people have to pay money to give it away, right? The recyclers are not ready to take it, right? If you have a nickel or cobalt, they don't mind paying you money to take it. So the chemistry and that is going to definitely matter, and also the acquisition of the battery itself is going to matter, right? And finally, the yield management. Well, which chemistry would you handle, right? I mean, do you have the capability to build technologies that can handle multiple chemistries, or are you going to be agnostic, or are you going to focus on one particular chemistry to build your process, right? So these are some of the key aspects. Again, I come back to it. Innovation is what's going to be differentiating yourself versus anybody else out there. And if you want to put India on the map and your company on the world map, innovation is what's going to make it happen for you. So in summary, as a country, we need a regulatory framework from entire cradle to battery or cradle to grave to cradle process for the entire recycling, right? An EPR policy that includes the entire supply chain. I know some of the regulatory aspects that we've just talked about, the draft regulations have covered this, but a good EPR policy that includes the entire supply chain, includes suppliers, distributors, the whole chain. If it could include the consumer as well, or the buyer of the EV, that is even better. So EPR policy doesn't necessarily have to mean fines. Incentives could be a big part of that, actually. Even in the US, if you return a Coke can, you get a couple cents, right? So such incentive policies always help in changing behavior, right? And as a business, sorry, I keep repeating this word, innovation and recycling into the recycling technologies. Vertical integration, Mr. Rao touched upon this topic. Vertical integration would mean a big part of this recycling process at the beginning is the dismantling and breaking the system down, right? Now, yes, there is a business for somebody who does it, but as a recycling process, if you give away a certain amount of your profit to the dismantling process, then you're starting to be left with a lot less, right? So vertical integration will always help if you're able to dismantle and then manage the entire process through your chain itself, right? And finally, innovative process around logistics and operations will help you manage those 30% of the cost, which is a big cost driver that you would see. That was that on that particular process. Here, I just want to quickly touch on what Spykke does and how we are committed to this entire circular economy, right? And this is a place where each one of you can relate to what we are doing. Right? Now, this is us at work, school, leisure, pleasure, anywhere we are always on our phones and devices. I mean, right now as I'm talking, some of you have phones or laptops or whatever battery-operated devices that you are on, but that's just life. That's how we've been living. It's gotten worse because of lockdown, because even inside the house now we are more on it, right? But mobile charging is a big problem. We all have it. We're all facing it on a day in, day out basis. We have two major solutions, current solutions. I mean, you can use a power bank, you can use wireless charging, or you can just plug in a cable. But there's a couple flaws in it, right? One is we don't really want to be stuck at a wall wart when we're trying to live our life. These days, we want to be on the move. We want to be able to do whatever we want. We want to shoot a rule or take a photograph or read a note. We don't want to be stuck at a wall wart standing next to it, right? Power banks are great. But one of the biggest challenges with power banks is in this room, all of us, how many of you have power banks? Can you raise your hand? How many of you have them right now? Right, so you have a lot more people who have power banks versus the number of people who have them right now. So there's so many more people, I'm sure many of them just didn't raise their hand. You also have those power banks. We never use them, we forget to charge them, we don't bring them. It is just not, we are lazy. Fundamentally lazy. Phone is the most important thing. We charge it. Everything else is secondary, right? So that's where we come in. We are saying, why do you want to buy a power bank when you can actually share it, right? Spykke being India's largest network, we are practically in every city, all the top cities. We are in every nook and corner. So what we are suggesting is, if you reduce carbon footprint by not buying a power bank and by sharing a power bank, you could save up to 2 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions, right? It's a big contribution. Now imagine everybody here, your companies, your employees, we all embrace this about sharing concept, sharing economy concept. It will be a big driver, right? So this is our circular economy commitment. We will of course raise awareness, which is what I'm doing today. You'll be using renewables in building our own products. Our entire operations fleet uses EV, or will start using EV more and more. We'll 100% recycle our materials and of course participate in any causes that will help us keep our planet green. Very simple. Spike is just a quick, is a power bank. You would have seen it on your table. It comes with all the cables built in, charges all the phones. We are available across every CCD, PVR, and metro station across multiple cities. We have a huge presence in Bangalore, Bombay, and 11 other cities. Just to give you an idea, this is where our presence is. Right. Finally, I want to leave you with this phrase I coined over the weekend. Carbon saved is carbon earned. And what I mean is carbon earned is carbon credits earned. So you don't have to always go and do things. If you do less of stuff, drive less, share more, you're saving carbon that in effect you're earning the carbon credits in return. Right? Thank you very much, and I'm open for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Pavan, for that talk. I think it's an interesting take to the whole thing about bringing innovation, because I think innovation is key to progress, especially when we are looking at circular economy, because we've realized a lot of things the way we do is not really sustainable, and that's where the whole concept of innovation comes in, I think. So players like you think about this whole sector from the innovation point of view are very, very important, and I think they're very that could be a big driver to change in this sector. And also I think your concept about share devices to recharge stuff is also, I would say, in terms of it's a design again in a way that you reduce resources which can be end up as waste in the long run. So I think that's this whole concept of leasing equipment. I think this is again going into the similar kind of vertical. If there are any questions, I think we can take them. We are again going a bit, I think, late, but we still have time for 3 or 4 questions, so we'll take them.
Hello, sir. It was a very nice detailed presentation. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
So I just noticed 2 slides which were very impressive, which I found that very impressive. First one was that business model canvas which you have incorporated into your presentation and tried to explain how this battery industries who wants to be a part of it, they can participate. And at the same time, your last slide which spoke about the incentives. So my question is regarding that, though we often speak about incentives, so what sort of incentives you are speaking about at this moment for the manufacturers or the recyclers who wants to be a part of the battery industry? And the second part is, do you think that only incentives to the manufacturer or recyclers is going to help, or rather, shall I put it like this, whether do you feel there is a requirement for incentives for the customers or consumers as well? So if both the things can be brought together in the draft guideline, will that be much more helpful? Your thoughts on that?
Just a second. I'm so sorry, but I missed out that on the first session. But if you can, whoever is asking question, if you can introduce, I think it will be really good.
Yeah, my name is Animesh. I'm from IIT Kharagpur.
Thank you, Animesh. I think it's a great question. I believe any sort of incentive has to be through the entire ecosystem, including me as a consumer. If I'm not incentivized to recycle a Coke bottle, I'm not going to recycle it. Right? I'm going to depend on kabadiwala or somebody inside my community making me feel bad for not segregating the waste properly. Right? So I personally believe there is a scope for innovation here as well. People can start building applications or ways where you can incentivize individuals, and because that is more important. Everything else is easy. If you want to make a mass movement for this, you have to incentivize at the individual and household level. And if you can gamify this, again, this is where the innovation comes in, right? You don't necessarily have to build software. You can build software around this. You can gamify this piece as well, where innovation, you collect points and then the points go into somewhere, right? So all this is where I think you have to incentivize across the ecosystem, and consumer is a big part of that.
I think it's a very interesting concept as well. I mean, I think I had read a few some years back, and there was this whole thing where we were talking about, I think it's apart from electronics, but it's a similar concept when You look at small pouches of shampoos and things like that, which are kind of not recycled at all. I think there was a very interesting, innovation which was happening in terms of its management, and I think it was in Malaysia or one of these, kind of countries in Southeast Asia, and basically a kiosk where you can come and put in, and then you get a free pouch for that. So I think, similarly, since we are reaping a lot of benefit of, kind of innovations and especially in electronics, I think this whole idea about, maybe you can accrue points and use it for something, I think consumer needs to be incentivized, but not always it's possible to do it monetarily, because I think there are a lot of restrictions on that, and that's where probably innovations can really work well. Thank you, Anvesh. Are there any other questions? We have one there.
Hi Pavan, this is Saket from Batix. As you rightly said, you guys can actually use the second-hand battery life. How is Spike positioned themselves to use it, and what is the current business model? Are you guys going for the new batteries, or is there a way that you're doing with second?
So, sure. Thank you. So what Spike is, basically Spike is, think of it as a Swiggy for charging or a Zomato for charging. Every time you think charging, you think Spike, right? With so many electric vehicles out there, so many people building electric recharging stations. I mean, you're not going to download 50 apps to recharge all these guys, right? So over time, all you're going to need is a Spike app, which will then tie up with all these other recharging stations or whatever, across the board, right? Whether it is EV, smartphone, whatever it is, right? So that's our vision. So we want to own this charging space. More importantly, we want to own the consumer mind share, right? So we want them to come on to Spike, and then they can explore everything. They can explore EVs, you can explore recycling, you can explore charging aspects as well, right? The way we also want to go about is, one aspect is the power banks that charge your mobile devices, right? Our next step is the power banks that would charge, or slightly bigger, that would charge laptops as well, right? So there's an opportunity to potentially leverage the second life, right? Because that form factor is slightly bigger. And then the next step for that would be, there is battery swapping, right? But then you're always going to need somebody. Your car is sitting out in the parking lot, as usual, you forgot to charge it. You're going to need somebody. You pick up the Spike app and call somebody, and they'll come and recharge your vehicle and go away. So those guys are going to come on a little electric vehicle with a battery on it, right? So that's what we'll be doing, and that's where, again, second life use can come into it, right? So there's many avenues. We as Spike are committed to making sure we get consumers' mindshare, and these sort of things is where we'll be focusing on.
Sorry, just a supplementary question. Do you already have a strategy to that, or is that something you think whenever the opportunity presents, that's when Spike will jump in?
So, in fact, our original goal was to build the EV charging service, right? But over the last, when we first started, we realized that building EV charging, there's enough players doing it. There's a lot of it is heavy lifting. There's not revenues coming in anytime soon, right? But what we said is, okay, let's take it the other aspect and charge the lowest common denominator of problems for everybody today, which is to charge their mobile phones. So if you're able to do that, if you get their consumer mind share, then we go and build on top of that and service them with other aspects of it. So yes, it's in the pipeline, and we will dial in as soon as we all start going out and going to offices instead of sitting home. So I'm very biased about people going to offices because our business is related to that.
Thank you.
Pavan, just a question. Does the battery swapping policy, which is notified by Niti Aayog, does that help in the kind of ecosystem that you are imagining, or are there barriers to that?
The biggest issue with battery swapping today is that we don't have a policy. So having a policy absolutely helps, right? The challenge, again, as an engineer, as an innovator, the challenge is the biggest value in an EV today is the BMS. Everything is a shell, you can get it anywhere, right? So that's why all these other companies are holding on to the battery management system. So somehow they have to come up with a form factor or a connectivity protocol so they can swap out the batteries. But again, the issues that you're seeing on one side is the Diwali around the vehicles that we are seeing. That is also another problem, right? So again, it comes down to the battery. Everything revolves around the battery and the safety of the battery. So it's going to be taking a few years before all that settles down, but policy is absolutely required to force people in that direction.
question. I think this will be the last because we're kind of standing in between the tea break, which was supposed to be at 11:30. So yeah, so last question.
Yeah. This is Manju from Toyota Kirloskar Motors. So
I can see
here, this side.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. This is Manju from Toyota Kirloskar Motors. So I have a couple of questions. One question you have mentioned in one of your slides that there is a second life batteries being used in BMW and Audi and some other automobiles. What exactly the concept of that is applied there, or how are you associated with that?
So what they do actually is in their factories, they have forklifts and other equipment that operate on batteries, right? So they recycle that's a second life application that they use.
Understood. So how do you oversee the refurbishment of this lithium ion battery and put it back in the vehicle? So will that concept will come in maybe in down the line another 1 or 2 years, because lithium ion battery has a rare metal, nickel and cobalt. We cannot go on recycling. Maybe some technology should come in. How do we put it back? The example after end of life vehicle of that battery, how we can recharge and put it back again for run for another 2 or 3 years. Well, the concepts are evolving.
It will absolutely evolve, right? Like your first question itself sort of answers the second question, because I take a Tesla car. Once the Tesla car stops working, I put that as an inverter inside my house, right? So that effectively extends its life by another 5 to 6 years, right? So those sort of products already exist in the West, and I'm hoping as more and more batteries. So we are very new in the EV space in India, right? So the batteries are not yet ready for being end of life for that particular application. So as that comes in, I'm sure the companies that we have here or new companies will spring up that will leverage licensed technologies from outside or build it indigenously.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Pavan. That was a wonderful presentation.